So some of you may or may not know, I was a past president several years ago, so like Kevin, and through that experience I have often considered, how do we make our club, what do you want to call it? A better club isn't the right way to say it, and I don't know how to say it better than that. How do we elevate our turning skills? Let me give a perspective. Anybody who's an AAW member? This month in the AAW magazine, did you see the spread on the New Zealand turners? Art exhibit for the New Zealand turners. Very interesting. They had lots of categories in the exhibit, and it was I don't know, I don't remember what the event was, but the thing that came to mind is, wow, the New Zealand turners really have it together. The whole group of pieces that were entered in the exhibit that they showed in this article were just outstanding. They have taken the time, spent the time, learned new skills to elevate their pieces. I have been trying to do that myself for years now. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but tonight is not intended to be a simple demo, because I feel like I need to be pushed, and if I need to be pushed, maybe everybody else needs to be pushed to think beyond the normal. I don't know if yeah, that's true. Mic recording. Anyway, my purpose in demonstrating what I'm going to demonstrate is to try to get you out of your comfort zone. And getting out of your comfort zone doesn't mean that it has to be difficult. You're looking at wood a different way, and maybe looking at wood a different way. I talk to a lot of folks because they look at my turnings and they say, man, I have a piece in my garage that I could have done that same thing. It's like, yeah, you could have, why didn't you? So my attempt tonight is to help you try to see beyond. I'm not an expert at this. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but if I can impart a little bit from what I tell you tonight and it helps you to try something new, that's what I want. And that's what I'm going for. So I have two things that I want to do, and we had the slides going before. Just I was showing some of my pieces to let you see some of the work that I've done. Again, I don't consider myself an expert. I'm doing something different. I've found a niche which I like. I'm going to take that niche a bit further this year, which I'll be working on throughout the year. But I've brought a box of pieces. I'm just going to unveil and send around. Maybe a couple of these I'll talk about. Again, these are what ifs. Lots of people are going to say, yeah, I have a piece in my garage that looks just like that. I could have done the same thing. So pull that piece out. So some of these are burls that I get in California. I have my own secret supplier. We do a lot of business together. I really like my supplier. So Mike, you'll have to think fast here. These are some of these burls that you're seeing: manzanita, chamise, lilac, various and sundry chaparral type burls. Most of them grow in the ground. That seems to be a benefit of the environment in California. But not all my burls come from my secret supplier. Some of the ones that I'm going to show you, the raw burls that I'll show you tonight, I'm buying them on eBay. If you want something like what I do, go on eBay. search for manzanita, you're going to find the same kind of stuff. Piece of apple. This is a bent piece. When you're chainsawing your tree down or helping somebody, don't cut the elbows out of them. Save them. So this goes two directions if you can see it. I'm here and I'm here. You can come up with unusual original shapes. Another apple. You can utilize interesting components of a branch, knots and other things. A mounted burl. It's bent enough that it probably wouldn't have stood up well, so I mounted it on a piece of burl that I got here at Craft. Again, these are just examples. Ronald. The left side of the room is getting them too late. This is an example of so the top of this is going to be an example of one that I turned tonight, where I've utilized a wide, narrow top on the piece. So the piece that I'm going to turn tonight will have something like that. That one's not bent, obviously, but I wanted to show the style of top on that. This is one that's still in progress. A big piece of ash, wormy ash. I'm going to have to bake this one a little bit longer because it's still got critters in it. I don't think I'm going to pass this one, but if you want to come look at it after, go ahead. Bake it at 180 for hours. Microwave. I don't microwave. And that's too big for the microwave. There you go. But if you have wood with bugs, whether it's worms or beetles or the powder post beetles, if you cook it in the oven at 180 degrees for long enough to get the temperature up in the wood, it'll kill the beetles. It'll kill whatever you're growing inside. Say again? Yes. Yep. Exactly. You know, she doesn't even flinch anymore. Okay, so I had a good friend of mine. He's a designer, architect, that kind of thing, and he came to me one day and he said, I want you to make me a 3-footed bowl. Now when you think 3-footed bowl, what do you think of? A bowl with 3 feet, right? That's not what he was going for. Let's see if we can get this. So this is kind of similar to what he was showing me, but it was his piece that he was showing me was aluminum, and it had a 3rd foot in the middle. And so I thought about it for a while, and I turned him the other half of this. So I'll pass this around, but you can try to imagine what I did to create this, right? I left it raw so you can see what I did, and if you have enough thought to ask the question, what's the red on the top, think about it a little bit. So this came, there were 2 pieces, there were 2 opposing pieces. This is one side, he got the other side. Okay, wood. The pieces that I do are bent. I look for a lot of this. I bought this on eBay. So a lot of this that I'm showing you tonight is eBay. eBay. You think about how would I turn this? Right? Between centers. Bottom, top. similar to the piece there, right? One day I'm going to find something like a corkscrew willow that has a twist all the way up that goes all the way around that I can cut the outside of. That's one of my dreams. I'll pass this one around. I have no idea how that happened unless it was a woven branch, but I still don't know. Has a stone in it here, but pass it. I need to get that back. I don't remember. It wasn't Utah, but I bought it on eBay. Lucked out. So I'm again just random. This one I'm gonna use in the demo. You can do little pieces. You can do bent pieces. So here's one of your forks in the tree, right? Depending on how you want to orient this, you think about the couple apple pieces that came around. You got the base that comes up to a spout. If you view them the right way, you can see similar to the pieces that I've made. This isn't wood that you have to buy on eBay. I got this one in American Fork. I got this one in, I think this was Orem cherry. Piece of peach. You could go either way. This one has lots of grape holes. You can even do the same thing on just a normal burl cap. And depending on how you orient this, if this is going to be hard to explain, let me see if I can draw it. You can get the same kind of effect. It's not hollow, but it's rough on this side, flat on the other side. If you put your tenon here, and depending on where you position the tailstock, then you get a piece that has one side of it that is rough and the other side is turned. So you would end up with something like, right? You can see it. So there's lots of interesting things that you can do with woods that you already have and woods that are accessible to you either locally or with a little bit of effort maybe on eBay. Just one more. So any questions so far? This is a piece of Turkish boxwood. Probably not the best thing to do with a exotic piece of wood, but it was fun. I'm not going to pass this one. I'll keep it up here. If you want to come see it afterwards, go ahead. So I have a couple pieces that I'm going to turn tonight. Sorry, any questions so far about anything that I've talked about or any of the wood, Ron? So the dense ones are probably the chaparral wood. The burls, the California burls, the manzanita, lilac, and so forth, they're very dense. And so they're, yeah, it's just, that's what the style of wood is, I guess, the species. But it doesn't have to be dense. I mean, you can do the same thing with box elder. This is a little burl that was on a branch in the box elder tree in Linden that I got the other day. I'll try to turn that first. So these two pieces, and what I want to show you partly tonight is some of these pieces of wood have a base that's narrow enough that you have to put a glue block on, or epoxy block in my case. I don't use glue, I use epoxy when I mount them. It's more stable, I think. And these are mounted with epoxy. 5 or 15 minutes. Yeah, the mix kind is what I use. And so I want to show you how I prepare one of these so I can mount it, because that's what I've got here. The reason that I mount them is because where I'm going to create my base is too small for the chuck, or it's too irregular for the chuck. I've got gaps in here. I've got enough wood to mount it, but there's not enough real good wood to create the tenon and hold it. And so I'm creating a glue block to do that. Now, one's pine, one's ash, another one's ash. I use whatever scrap I've got. I always, whenever I turn one of these, I always support the top with the tailstock. But you're going to mount it, so this is flat. I've already turned this. It's got a good surface on it, so it's flat. The challenge is going to be when I turn this flat, it's been to the bandsaw, but it's not ready yet. I could try to do this, but I don't know where my center is. How do I find my center? That's what I want to show you tonight. There's a trick to it that I've got. So that's the first focus here. There's going to be some technical. Say again? Oh, there's going to be some technical things about this that I want to talk about as I go. So I don't know what they call this style. I've heard people talk about it as a safety center. It's not a step. Did you say step? Safety center, step center. It's got a point here that retracts. It's got a spring loaded behind it. It's got a lot of fine teeth on it. I like it because if your lathe kind of loses the tension on this side, it'll just spin. But you want to take care, because you don't want to mount a piece that's going to kind of walk itself off, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So this piece, I want to make my spout on this right here. I'm not actually I'm going to turn the base just to show you how to mount it, but the idea is that I'm going to make my spout right here. I'm going to glue this in, and so I've got to get it flat so I can put it on the glue block. Let me talk here just a second about centers. Kraft sells two really nice, inexpensive centers. One has 3 steps here. One has 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. If you want to, and I'll show you how I use them. This bigger one is 5/8 cup. This is a 1/4 inch cup. I don't know what this diameter is, but if you got some calipers, you could measure. So I've got on this one, I know this is 5/8, 1 1/8, and I don't remember, maybe 1 3/8. And I use these for stabilizing pieces, and I'll show you that as I go. But I'm going to go to my bigger cup just for stability here. So my effort on this one is to get a good spot where I want to center this. So I'm going to rotate the piece. I'm going to look this way, and I'm going to turn it and look this way to see kind of where I balance this. I need to go a little bit out. Now, when I do this, I want to get my live center to bite into the wood. But when I do this, so Paul, I'm going to go over here to the board for a minute. You're creating tension. You gotta cut this flat. You gotta mount it, and then you have to have it true once you have it mounted and glued. So when you come back to it, over here. Thank you. So I have this piece exaggerated here, right? And I'm going to put tension here, and I'm going to put tension here. What's going to happen to the piece of wood? It's going to bow, right? Maybe this pushes this way. So when I cut this flat, if I don't compensate for that, what happens when the tension comes off? Your base is already off center. So when I go to put this on my glue block, my point of center is over here now. So you have to think, you want to think through these things, as you're doing this, because every step of getting this to the glue block, getting it glued, and then putting it back on the lathe to turn it, I'm creating tension points that are going to create some type of off center. What happens, so let's say that I have it glued, I've got a glue block with a tenon here, my piece of wood, I'm exaggerating of course, and I'm going to put tension on it when I'm going to turn it. And have you ever turned a twig pot, Alan, that when you let the tension off, you're off center? So you go to drill it, and it drills your, so you've got a really fine drawing here. You're off center because you didn't compensate for the tension. And that's what I'm going to adjust for here. Well, you could try that, but it won't work. You won't believe how much tension this puts on a piece of wood, even big pieces of wood. Even something like this. You will create tension by bringing your tailstock up against it. You're going to squash it. And if you don't compensate for it, I'll show you how to compensate. But I want you to think about it first because that's what I'm dealing with here. Any piece of wood is going to have compression when you put it on the lathe and put it between centers. Okay, so I'm going to put enough tension on this to make my center bite. I want to get it in the wood so the cup engages the wood. Then I'm going to back it off a bit. And when I start these pieces of wood rotating, a lot of times I will go down to 0 on purpose because it would be really exciting to have this sticking into your tool rest. Dale or somebody made the joke that you better sharpen your tool rest, but I can't claim that saying. Yes? Safe. I'm not joking. You really want to take some care with this kind of a turning. I will, until I get this in a chuck, I'm going to say it's not safe. I mean, I've been doing this for these style for 6 years or so now. I haven't lost one. I'm going to knock on wood. There's always the first time, but I haven't lost one. And that's just because maybe I'm extra conservative. I don't know. Maybe I'm just lucky, but I haven't lost one. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is create a flat. I'm going to recut this with my turning tool. I'm going to come in and just kind of whittle this down. You don't have to try to get real grabby here. Take off lots of wood. Okay, this is your favorite friend. Can you come overhead? Do you want me to try this? You get it? Okay. So maybe you're not going to be able to see this on the camera unless we can get this adjusted. Yeah, you gotta come right a bit. Coming. Okay, so when you take your straight edge, and if you put your straight edge here and it rocks over your midpoint, you've got a high spot right here. You don't want a high spot. This has actually got a little bit of a gap because I'm high at the outside. So I'm going to come back and take a little bit off the outside. That's a lot better. I've still got a little bit of gap. I don't want the high spot there because then you don't get a good bond. If I have a little bit of undercut, I'm okay, but it's high out here. The rest of the inside where it's going to be on the glue block is it's flat there. So the question is now, how do I get this to that? Because I've got a nub here. But you see, I got a helper right in the middle of my nub is my center point for my cup, right? So if I use that, I swear I had my drill. I don't have my drill. Okay, I'll talk you through it. You take the smallest drill bit that you have and you drill that hole past the level of the wood here, so when you take this nub off, there's still a hole there, right? My glue block right in the center has a drill hole. This is going to have a drill hole, and if I take a little nail, I can clip it right here, so when I turn it around and the point sticks out just a little bit above the surface of my wood, I can then match that to the center point on this base, so I know where to put it. I don't have to guess. So when I epoxy this together, I'm going to have a little teeny nail in there that's going to guide me center to center on my glue block to the base of the piece of wood. Everybody understand? So if you're trying to figure out how to mate two pieces of wood, that's a really nice trick. Yes. So some bandsaw blades. So when I part a piece, I'll take it down to ½ inch, ¼ inch, depending on how big the piece is, maybe 1 inch, depending if it's bigger. But I'll take it down to a point, and you can either rock it off or take it to your bandsaw. Some bandsaw blades will cut the nail without any big issue. This one has a nail, that one has a nail. What time are we at? We have time. For my setup, my lathe permanently has my drive center there. My nice big chuck goes right over the top of it, and I don't have any problem. Same, that would be a lot better on your bandsaw blade. Yeah, I mean, lots of ideas, lots of ways to do this. When I did this the first time, I didn't have a toothpick. I used a nail. It's tradition now. But toothpick's a good idea. I should get a box of toothpicks in my... Yeah. So this is a simple piece. You can see it's bent, or can you see it's bent? You want to go to number 3? So it's got a little bit of a slant. So when you cut this, what's going to happen? So like some of the pieces that I sent around, here's my burl, and it kind of has that slant on it, right? I'm going to end up with top on it that kind of, whatever the shape's going to be. And something in here is not going to get cut because it's inside the circle of the cut. So it gives you the little bit of variation that you might be looking for in the piece. This one's just a real simple one, but I'll show you the basics of it. So here's how you compensate once you get it all glued up, and provided that you've done all the pre-work to get the center in the right place, which I did, dealing with all the compression points. I'm going to cut this flat. So tell me what I just did there. What's the effect of that? Say again? I released the tension. How did I release the tension? Everybody understand? If I have a top that's like this, do I have tension? Even without putting my tailstock up to it, I can see that when I put it up, I'm going to have tension because my cup center is going to come down like this, and it's going to engage on one side, and it's going to try to push the piece one way or the other because of the unevenness. And so by cutting it flat, now that I engage, I've taken that away. Now if I push hard enough, it's still going to compress. So I don't compress. I engage the tailstock and just engage it enough that I support the end of my piece without trying to create additional tension on it. Yeah. I don't have a favorite. Sometimes the piece kind of dictates. So this piece here, like I was noting earlier when I sent that one of those last pieces around, this has a wider top on it, but it's narrow. And so like one of those, it's going to have a nice swooping edge here on the long side, but it's going to be narrow here. So somehow I'm going to come up like this, and then, so this way and this way, to try to create a nice, I'm going to call it a sensual shape when I get there. This one is it's just a fun little piece that you want to turn in just a couple minutes. Is that good enough yet? It's preference. It's still a little bit stocky for me. as soon as I can, I want to try to define where the base is going to be on this. Before I go too far, and you always want to think about this, I've still got enough wood in that spout that I can come back here and undercut just a little bit. Do real light cuts. You're dealing with leverage. You don't want to undo your epoxy joint. So you remember that I have one of these that has a 1/4 inch center at the top. Hopefully I got the right drill bit. See what I did? Is my piece supported? And am I putting any tension on it? That's what I like about these step style live centers. Now that I've got it supported, I can come back out here and I can cut a bit more. When you're doing a long kind of neck like this, it looks a lot better if you can do this with a nice gradual slope from one side to the other, where you don't have a flat spot somewhere in there. This flat spot makes it look a little bit unnatural. So nice swooping curves. Kip does you haven't done that demo for a long time, Kip, about the shapes. Kip does a nice demo where he talks about shapes and how to refine shapes. It may be a worthwhile thing for the club to do again sometime soon. Okay, so I'm not going to sand anything. I'm just trying to get this close to where I want it to be, and then I'll move on to the other piece. I have a modified parting tool. I don't use parting tools unless they're a 1/4 inch parting tool. It needs this, for the stuff that I do, I need the stability in the 1/4 inch stock. But what I modify, can you go over top for a minute, number 3? See if you can see this. This point on my parting tool is a little bit proud, so I've got a little bit of a slant on the edge. I like it that way because for me it helps me control my inward push. If it's just flat, I mean, you can try whatever you want. I've just found that this works really well for me. That kind of keeps me, that point creates a little bit of an angle as I'm cutting in the wood and keeps this edge of my parting tool against the base. When I make this cut on the base of the piece, I'm going to try to be as perpendicular to my lathe bed as possible. I want to go straight in because what I'm doing is creating the base of the piece. That base is what it's going to sit on, and I want to have it, I don't want to have a curve. I don't want to have something that if I come back and touch it up a little bit with sanding paper, it's going to create a concave area that makes the piece not sit well. So by coming in nice and straight with a really sharp tool, you can get a really nice foot on it. Then you can come back a little bit at an angle and undercut a little bit. I touched it here. When I send this around, you'll see a little line on the underside because I was moving too fast. So how many knew Ken Fletcher? Ken called me one day. I showed him my routine on making these pieces, and he called me one day and he said, I can't sand the underside of my, so he was parting his piece, and he said, I can't sand underneath the base of my piece. It's like, Ken, you went in too steep. If you go too steep, you can't get in there. You can't get in there with a disc sander. You can't get in with an orbital sander. You're just trying to get a little bit of undercut. You don't have to go real deep. Just deep enough that when you set it on that base now that I cut first, that you have a little bit of gap so it doesn't touch in the center and roll around. So I don't have a bandsaw. I can't cut this, but you guys can see the net effect of it. I sand primarily with an orbital sander. Even little pieces like this I'll sand with an orbital sander. So that's just a fast example I can send around. You guys can see kind of the technique. My nail is still right here in the center. You can actually see it there. Lauren, no. So I'm going to use the same type of technique on this piece that I did on that little one. It's no different if you like doing little pieces or big pieces. So I'm off by a 32nd of an inch. What should I do about that? If I make my dovetail tenon a dovetail tenon here, I can't adjust it because that angle on the dovetail is going to pull it back where it's supposed to be. So you make your tenon a little bit more flat. I use the center mark over here to position my piece, and before I put much of any tension on it, tighten this back down. Maybe a 64th of an inch, but that's okay. I'll compensate for it. So again, I want to get a bite on the tailstock side so my cup center is holding it. At this point, it's only engaging with the center point in my cup. That's okay, because I'm not going to be putting a lot of pressure out here yet. But I'm engaging it and I'm backing off I don't know if you can see this, but even a little bit of pushing is going to cause this to push up in the center here. I don't want that, so I'm going to engage it to get it seated, back it off a little bit just so it's got enough to hold it in place. I treat these pieces in sections, and like some of the bigger ones that I sent around earlier, it's easier to, Kevin, or where did some of those pieces end up? Are they back up? Okay, let me grab one. So if this was the piece, I kind of do this in sections. I want to get round here first. And so I just shave and shave and shave. This is number one. Shave it like you were doing on if you were turning a candlestick or turning a spindle, you want to get all the rough off. What I'm trying to do is create this, or cut it down to the point where I get a plane on that edge where I start to connect sides. What I want to create here is the idea of connecting continents, is what I call it. I've got an edge that almost connects here. It comes, so you can see it's continuous. This edge I can't get it, but what you're trying to do is create a piece where when you look at the shape, your eye is going to want to complete what's on the other side. Let me see if I have another one that illustrates this. Not in these pieces, but still kind of the idea is you whittle it down enough that you start to get a spot where you can get a consistent curve from top to bottom, and then you're creating the shape that you need. If you have too many gaps that are too like this, you're not creating the shape. Your eyes, I can look at that and I can see what it should be because I can see the shape on the opposite side. So your eye is going to want to complete it if it can. Your mind, it's a bit of an optical illusion. Okay, questions, anyone? Okay, I'll keep going. Maybe I don't understand. Yeah. You're talking about right here? So, yes. Yeah, so just like on, let me pull out this other piece. Even if it's, whether it's tall or short, you want to get the arc. So you want that consistent edge. So like I was talking about the corkscrew piece that's in my dream somewhere. If I have that corkscrew piece, the only way it works is if I can cut down. So if it was spinning on the lathe, picture it spinning on the lathe, a corkscrew piece of wood, that piece of edge has to cut from top to bottom to complete it. Even though you've got gaps and it swirls, I have to have that outside edge cut all the way from top to bottom. Yeah, and that's, yeah. And like this one, it has a little bit of a gap there, but it's close enough. If the gap was too big like this, it might start to look funny. It doesn't have enough cut. So the way to compensate for that is to cut some more. Don't be afraid to cut more wood off to get the kind of look that you need on your piece. One thing that I didn't talk about, that I need to here for a second is when you want to take a piece like this and go to the lathe, you want to cut this angle here and this angle here as perpendicular as possible. And eyeballing it doesn't always get you a good view, but if you take something like this where you can draw perpendicular marks, then you get a better, when you go to the bandsaw, you can get a better cut because you can see with the perpendicular, top to bottom and then perpendicular, you can see the angles better. Doesn't matter what the piece is. If my spout was going to be in this section, I would try to line this up in a way that would give me a good perpendicular cut right here and right here, so I can line them up. The other thing that I didn't show you, sorry. This is a necessary tool, that nub that's on the bottom of the little piece. This is overkill for that piece, but the big piece I have over here, I had a 4-inch base on it, 4-inch chuck that was holding that. When I cut it off, I had a lot of wood that I had to get out of the way, and so something like this is very useful. I won't advocate that you take the guard off. I took the guard off, but I don't, for safety reason, it's probably smarter to leave it on. Okay, any other questions before I keep going, Tony? The what? I don't ever use carbide, so I can't. No. Yeah, I understand his question now. He's asking, do I use instead of using the saber tooth or whatever they call it, grinding wheel, do I use a flap disc? The thing that I would say about the flap disc is that it's probably less easy in some ways to control sandpaper discs than it is a grinding wheel. Maybe I don't have as much control over it as I might need otherwise. It's worth a try. If you've got flap discs, try them. That might work. Yeah, they're stiff. Yeah, does everybody know what a flap disc is? It's a round disc that has layers of sandpaper. Yeah, that's what Tony's talking about. Okay, other questions? Okay, we'll go to it. Can you see the shape? Can you see the shape? You can see it when it spins. It's got right? So that's what we're going for. And I've got to cut from here. I've got to get that edge all the way down to the base. Anybody want the guard? Okay. The name of the game here, and again I'm going to emphasize, I spun this a number of times before I started the lathe. This is where you got to make sure your tool rest is really out of the way, because it might be out of the way here, but it might not be out of the way there. You really have to pay attention, so do be careful if you're going to try this. And I should start slower, but here we go. So I have a lot of wood here, and sorry, I didn't finish my discussion of the sections. One is kind of planing off the wood to get to a consistent surface, top to bottom. So if I'm working on a long kind of spindle, I want to get to some surface where I can see that I can make a shape from there. But I typically will go like 1, 2, 3, or 3, 4, 5. I'm going to break this up in some way that I'm going to do sections at a time. What you don't want to do on something like this is cut this to final thickness with a whole bunch of wood here that I got to get rid of, because then you're creating a situation where this wood won't support the cutting that you're doing here. So at some point I've got to work top down. So if I do 1, 2, 3, I might do 3, 4, 5, and then I'm at the end of it, meaning that my final cuts, because this one is so narrow at the top, my final cuts need to start further away from the headstock, because I have to be able to support the wood that I'm cutting as I go down. Right? Understand? Okay. So the nodules that you were pointing out, that's what's coming off here. I've got a high spot. Can't really see it there, but I've got a high spot here, I've got a high spot here, and I've got a lot of high spot over here. This is a big gouge that I'm using for stability. My wood is not probably as big as this tool would typically support, but I'm taking really light cuts. So there's no race here. As I cut, I'm looking a lot at the profile up here because I can't see it well down here. Let's try it. You guys will have to tell me if you see it better. Well, it's I guess I like it faster, but not too fast. Remember, safe speeds. So, yep, that's a good technique. So did everybody hear the comment, the question? If you put something behind here that gives the contrast, you can see the shape better. I could put a piece of black paper or cardboard or something that might allow me to see it better. Okay, so my nubs are mostly gone. I have a lot of wood up here, so I'm gonna call that my number one. I'm gonna come up here to the top. Well, yeah, base is fine for now. What's a safe way to find the wood with your gouge before you go sticking it in? Just slam it in. Yeah, we had one opinion. Yeah. If I bring the back of my tool in, I'm not creating a cutting surface it's going to grab. So that's a good way to find. I can back into the piece and find it before I engage the cutting edge. I've got to change the angle here a little bit because I'm going to. You remember how I adjusted the box elder piece that I sent around? When you're working on this outside edge, you could keep your tool rest parallel with the bed by creating a little bit of an angle. It gives you a little bit better approach to the top. I need to get this flat, so to speak, and start the shape that I'm looking for. Remember how I said I want to make a swoop in here? I want that to come down like this. You see it? It's completely objective how you want to do this. If you want it shallow, if you want it steep. The steeper you make it, the harder it's going to be to sand it, depending on how you sand, especially if it's circular. I've got wings on this one, but if it's circular, you got to think about how you're going to sand it. Can I get to it with a 2-inch sanding disc? Can I get to it with my orbital sander? If it's too deep, you can't get to it with an orbital sander. Most of my sanding is that way, but I do also use 2-inch sanding discs. I'm going to go just a little bit steeper in there. I like that curve. Okay, so I'm disengaging. I'm going to turn my RPMs down quite a bit. You see that it let loose? It's not quite, it's got some vibration in it. So I adjusted a little bit here, but I didn't get it all out. So I'm going to recenter it. Got a real long neck on this. It's going to take a lot of light work. See if I can keep from destroying my piece. This one's going to be a challenge. I'm going to concentrate a little bit here, not talk. Okay, so my live center here has a cup that is 5/8 inch on the outside. Which might be just good enough for the size of the drill hole on this piece without getting into this outside edge. I'm going to try it. Hopefully I don't destroy it. Say again? That's right. Now we'll improvise, but yeah, you're probably right. No, but as Tony and I were joking, if anybody doesn't know, Tony's the president of, right? The president of the Utah Club. We were humoring tonight about a demo that Ken Fletcher did up there. He did a couple that were that were humorous. I don't think he had. He did a square block with a sphere in the center. So if you picture a square block, he cut it on one axis in the center, then he turned it and cut it again in the center, so it appears that you have a square on each outside corner, but you have, the center's cut out. So he tried to slope it so it looks like there's a sphere inside these squares. I don't think he did a practice demo. The demo night was his practice, and he pulled it off. And there was it was. Everybody jumped. There was another one, Tony was saying, where he rotated his piece and accidentally cut the tenon off. That one wasn't quite the success. I've got probably a good inch to inch and a half that I can bore this. Can you see the diameter here on the, I don't know if you can see it on the, you'll have to envision that the diameter of this is just big, barely big enough to take this 5/8 bit. So I've got probably about an inch and a half depth that I can go in here without going through the side. What I already know about this bit is that the shank is like 2 1/8 inch long. So if I go halfway, that's, I'm an inch deep. I'm going to stop there. What I have found is that putting twigs in one of these only requires a good inch, and that good inch is enough depth to hold it. And there I go again. My 5/8 inch cup center is now giving me the stability by putting it in the hole that I just bored, and that's how I'm going to hold it. You've got to, so if I cut all this and then come back to it after I cut all this to thickness, it wouldn't have the stability through this neck to support boring the hole. So I've got to bore the hole before I get there. Questions? Okay. If you have questions, yell them out. Okay, now I'm going to work on my final shapes. And I'm working from top down. So I've got support on both ends, right? I can turn my speed up. I'm still not, well, this is a small diameter piece. I happen to be at 1150. It doesn't sound really scary, does it? When you get to a revolution on this where it starts to sound scary, it is scary, and you should probably turn it down. You'll be able to hear when it sounds like it's too fast. So make the sound count. the principles of the tool techniques that we already know because we're wood turners apply here. I'm using my bevel. I need to use my bevel. Even though I'm cutting a lot of air, because the RPMs are fast enough, I've got the stability if I've got my bevel there. If I'm too shallow or too steep, whatever you want to call it, I don't have the stability and my tool is going to do things that I don't want it to do. But when I'm coming in here to make my cut, as soon as I get a little bit of edge, my bevel's there supporting that cut all the way down. So normal principles, use your tools like they're supposed to be used. I don't. Well, you sharpen your tool again. Yeah, carbide probably isn't going to help you either. I do a lot of extracting when I need to. Some of the pieces that have rocks in them, I want them to stay. I sold one in Texas this year. Had a piece of granite that was about that big and about 1/2 inch wide, embedded in the piece. I didn't cut into the granite, but the piece was inside the burl, oak burl that I turned. So you can do some interesting things. One of these pieces had a. There you go. Pass that one around. That's got a rock in it. If I can keep it, I will. This one also has a rock in it. Sometimes those bits make the piece fun because it's unusual. Because you've got extra bonus pieces in there. You'll know that you hit a rock, right? So aside from the fact that some of these burls are so dense, it seems like they must have a lot of what's the term for sand? Silicone. Yeah, thank you. They get a lot of silica in them, and it seems to dull your tools easy. There was one, and I swear the piece that I just demoed first, it was about that big. The ball of the vase was about that big, but I swear it didn't have rocks and grit in it. But I would turn about an inch and my tool was dull. I had to sharpen it again. So depends on what the wood is. Sometimes you get those types of things that, and pay $37 again and again. I mean, usually when your edge is gone, it's easy to resharpen. If you get into big rocks, yeah, you're gonna maybe take some edge off your tools. But I'm floating in the hole. Yep. So that cup center went in that 5/8. I'm not putting any end pressure on it at all. Just in there far enough that I can support the piece. You wouldn't want to put it in like 1/4 of an inch. Some of the wobble here could extract it, but yeah, it's in most of the way there. Kind of backing into the piece to find the edge. See how I'm moving my body as I'm cutting that corner there. That's what I'm saying. Just normal turning techniques are important here. I could probably go a little bit more. I probably will, but I want to get a little bit more wood out of the way here before I do it. take one more swipe at this top, make it a little bit backing in to find the edge. I don't want to create any excitement by cutting into my 5/8 inch board spout there. So again, I'm working top down. Trying to shape the piece as I go. So another tool technique here. You're turning a lot of air. There's a lot of gap here. Usually when you use a bowl gouge, your handle is down. I mean, you're kind of at an angle, right? You're using the bevel, so your handle's down from where your tip is. Because you have so much air in the gap area, if you're too steep, handle too far down, your tool is going to start bouncing. What I do to compensate for that is to lift the handle, which isn't always great technique for gouge, but by lifting the handle, it puts the pressure on the top of the tool rest instead of, so if my handle is down, every time that edge comes around, it's going to have a tendency to push me like this, right? If I lift the handle, it can push down, but it doesn't push me out. So by bringing the handle up a little bit more parallel to the bed weight here, I get more stability as I cut, and I don't get all the bounce that I would otherwise. If you can think about this, I don't really try to adhere to the third, 2/3 type of thing. You're taking what the wood is going to give you. But what I try to do is pick what I call a midpoint. The midpoint is wherever you want to put it. It doesn't really mean the center of the piece. When you pick a midpoint, you're going to work this way and work that way. Meaning I'm going to cut from that midpoint down, I'm going to cut from that midpoint up. That's where I'm creating the top of the arc. I'm going to cut down from the midpoint. Does that make sense? So if I put that midpoint here, I should slope to the right. If I put the midpoint here, it should slope to the left. So that's the high point of your form. And that's what I'm doing here. As you've seen me change direction a couple times. I need to come refine the neck here. This is the last time through. My midpoint is about right here. That's why I'm starting. You might think, are you cutting downhill and uphill in the same stroke? And yeah, I probably am. I don't want to flat in here. Don't like this area right here. Okay, back to my midpoint. I'm looking at the profile on the top of my, I'm looking up here, I can't see it down on the bottom. Let's take a look. So I've got it cut, flows all the way down. The arc is really slight, but it's never straight down here. And I've tried to achieve the same up here. I'd like to part this tonight just to show you, but I'm not going to part it because I need it on the lathe so I can do the sanding that I need to do. So when I take this first plunge cut to cut the base, the tool rest should be parallel with the bed. There's a reason for that, especially when you have a larger piece of wood where you might be going deep. Your plunge needs to be straight in, perpendicular to, again, to the bedways. Needs to be straight so when this piece is parted off, it's flat. I can sit it on, and I try to get at least a 1/4 inch on the outside of the base for the real base. Understand, my poor language is not explaining well, but that's what I'm going to try to achieve here. If my tool rest is turned, if you can think about it this way, it has a tendency to want to roll your tool in a way. You might have a tendency to roll your tool because it's a little bit crooked. It's hard to see that, but if you try to plunge really deep into a piece, well, you don't want to bind up your tool, but by tipping the tool, it's going to catch, and I don't want to catch. So especially on the base, I'm going to keep it parallel. Then I might turn just ever so slightly when I do my undercut, because the angle of my tool is just slight in that undercut. So I want to kind of keep the tool rest a little bit to the same shape that I'm cutting. So I'm going to go straight here. So this is my plunge. I'm picking a spot that I want to go in. And the piece is going to tell you, is this a good angle for my base? I went to I don't know how many of you know who Art Leesman is, a pretty well-known sculptural turner. He did this demonstration where he talked about the base of your piece. A lot of people, when they turn, they make the base of their piece usually wider than their chuck, because their chuck is a limiting factor. They want to get as much wood. If you picture a bowl coming out of here, they want to get as much wood as they can in that bowl, because that is a really great piece of wood. But you're limiting it, and you may not be creating the right proportion unless you take more wood out. Don't be worried about taking wood out. Make the form better than the piece. If you make the form better than the piece of wood, you're always going to win, because the shape is going to rule. If your base is too thick, it's just, your piece isn't going to be balanced well. So consider that as you're working. That's another benefit of the glue block here. I can cut this away and create a smaller base if I want. This particular piece needs at least this much base just to give it the stability, but that's I'm there. This is a finished piece. I just need to sand it, and after the final sanding, I'll part it off. So, questions? I don't mean to sound egotistical, but I have had very few failures. Yeah, so I attribute, I'm not going to attribute that to skill. I'll attribute it to luck more than skill. I'm really careful. There's a tendency, especially with the burls that I use, that these are root systems, so you can imagine the bush is coming down into the top of the root crown, and it's going into roots, right? And as these roots come into the crown, the root burl, there's gaps in there, there's fissures in there. And what starts to happen is you make the base of your piece, you're cutting what used to look like solid wood, around that shape, into a narrow piece of wood, and it starts to flex. That's when you need, so I stop a lot, I look at my piece. As you work with your tailstock and adjust it, and that you'll see that it's starting to flex or not. And if I find a piece that flexes, it's off the lathe. That's probably happened 5 times. There's 2 pieces like that the root burl was upside down, so mounted on the lathe where the top of it was here and the roots were here. And as I did that, I cut, as I came up into the spout was actually disconnected. The fissure, my spout was a 2-inch spout, it was a really big piece, and the fissure went underneath like this, and so this part of it moved. I thought, this is too good of a piece to to chuck out. So I decided I wanted to salvage it. The way that I did it is I created just a flat patch. You could do a butterfly patch if you wanted, but I did a flat patch that connected the upper part of that to the lower part of it, and it stabilized it here. And then I went around the backside. I got a long, I think it was an 1/8-inch drill, and I drilled 2 different holes. One went actually down through the top of the spout as deep as I could drill with that drill, and I sunk a piece of brass rod down in the hole. And I did the same on a spot on the other side. So I had the patch, and I had a piece of brass and a piece of brass, and that stabilized it, and I was able to save the piece. I couldn't have sold it if it wasn't stable. If somebody would go try to pick it up by the top, and it would probably have peeled it off. What I'm trying to get at is there's ways to save it sometimes, but don't get into a position where you're unsure about what you want to do, and you get yourself into trouble because you cut too far, and then you're throwing pieces off your piece of wood. You don't want to get there. So you got to pay a lot of attention. Don't get in an unsafe position. I have a blower that's right next to where I work, an airline. I'm blowing all the time. I've got an awl. I've got little dental tools that I pick stuff out. When I find, so you're cutting along and your tool goes dull all of a sudden, you've hit dirt in a lot of cases, I'll stop, blow it out, clear it out, use the awl to dig stuff out. It's a hazard of this, the burls, it's a hazard. Doesn't matter if it's a manzanita piece or a box elder piece, it could have grit or something in it, so stop and take care of it. Was that a question, Kip? Yes. Yeah, and that's a great way to do it, especially if you have deep fissures in it. A pressure washer can get in there a bit better. Sometimes there's one that I had. I posted a picture of it before I washed it, and somebody says that looks just like a turkey. It was one of the pieces that Paul was showing here earlier, but it really looked like a turkey. I cut half of it, but I took that, actually, it was so bad, I took it to the car wash and went through two car wash, spray cycles to get the stuff out. It still didn't get it all, but it was a beautiful piece of wood. One of the highest priced pieces that I ever sold. It was really nice. Anyway, but other questions? Yeah, Tony. Ask who? Oh yeah. What's real? Yeah. 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 What's really nice, what's really nice is when you get those nodules on the inside. Now, there's one criticism that I have of this piece. Can anybody see it? Tell me, somebody with a good critique, tell me what's wrong with it. My thickness here is narrower than it is here. So because I left this on the glue block, when I take this home, I'm probably going to cut this narrower, because I want, just like you do on a natural edge bowl, you want the thickness of that bowl, a uniform thickness all the way around. And so when I take this home, I'm going to work on this some more and cut this the same thickness all the way down the slope. It's going to change my form, but when you look at this and look at this, and this is heavier than that, it doesn't look right, does it? So critique yourself. Don't be worried to adjust it. Anyway, take a look. If you have more questions, come up afterwards, but I've gone 10 minutes over. I think I'm done. So.